Hi, my name is Raquel. In order to buy or sell, you have to have the money of the beast on your mind or in your hand. It's one of those words they don't translate correctly. It's in the New Testament, and like I've told you, I'm not, I like the New Testament, but, I don't believe Jesus really walked on water. And, Jesus had a lot of good parables and a lot of wisdom in there. But this is actually in the Apocalypse, which I believe was a Hebrew book that was plagiarized by Christians who added stuff about Jesus at the beginning and end of it. And it all relates to the Jewish war they had in 66 AD. They revolted against the Romans and started coining their own money, so that in order to buy or sell, you have to have the charagma, which means money. And the unabridged Greek-English lexicon shows you it means the impress on the coin or stamp money coin. And the 666 has to do with, like, if A equals 1 and B equals 2 in Hebrew letters, which, just like in Greek letters and Roman letters, the numbers were the same as letters. Alpha, beta, and there was 1 and 2, and so if you add up the letters of Nero Caesar's name, it adds up to 666. And Nero was the emperor in 66 AD, and so they revolted against Rome, and the Roman soldiers came in there and destroyed Jerusalem and made a big mess over there. So then the Christians came along, I think, and, they must have, and added stuff about Jesus at the beginning and end of that. And I think the Christians destroyed all the evidence of how the Gospels were concocted. Somebody looked through there for things that the Messiah would have to fulfill. It's like, what would a Messiah do if he or she came back today? It's like the Messiah would rebuke the so-called Christians because they spend so much time talking about this guy St. Paul, and Paul, the things he says aren't logical, or else they're just real trite. There were a lot of rabbis at the time that Paul lived that said things that weren't much different. It's just, Paul says if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is risen from the dead, you'll be saved. And that's just not going to work. The only thing that's going to save us on this planet is if we start to really conserve and not burn up all this fossil fuel that's causing global warming and causing the glaciers to melt and the oceans to rise and all this crazy kind of weather. And then we have all this funny money stuff on Wall Street. This is in the business section. They're gloating over about this Volcker rule. And Paul Volcker was like head of the Fed back in, I forget, let's see here. Paul Volcker, former head of the Fed, with Elizabeth Warren over here. And she might run for president. I mean, it would be better if she ran for president than for Hillary Clinton. And the thing about this Volcker rule, it's just like, it's like a chapter in the, what is this, they have a big bunch of regulations they're trying to pass right now. And the Dodd-Frank regulations, and none of these articles tell you that the whole reason they have to pass this stuff is because stupid Clinton, back just before he ended his presidency, signed this thing called the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which did away with regulations on derivatives. And so we had this, these credit default swaps, and these banks would package these phony mortgages into these and sell them, and that became I think it's like a $1 trillion market or something ridiculous like that. It's just it might even be like 600 trillion. I just can't remember I might have that article in here. I think it's like a $600 trillion. It's certainly not 600 million or billion. I think it's in the trillions, and so they have to pass this Volcker rule and this Dodd-Frank bill in order to put this money market thing back together again. But these rich people on Wall Street who play all these funny money games have kind of like looted the country, and now they're buying up all these bank foreclosed homes. It's kind of like what happened during the Depression, that people lost their houses and then the banks foreclosed and they got all the houses. And so it's like they have these huge companies now that own these big apartment buildings, and it's a business. And so it's like there's going to be only like two classes in the United States. There's going to be the renters, who are basically slaves, and then you're going to have the people who own all the apartments. And but it doesn't have to be this way. It's such a simple thing to do, would be to eliminate money. There were a lot of famous people that believed in eliminating money, and I've known about this for quite a while. I think I was just out of high school, and I kind of had a spiritual experience. I saw that movie, The Exorcist, and I thought, wow, I'm kind of possessed by a devil, And so I started praying to God, and I thought to myself, well, what would it be like in the kingdom of God? And I thought, well, people wouldn't have to eat. But that was irrational, because food kind of brings people together, and it's, it's not that bad of a thing. I mean, God gave us these fruits and herbs and everything else, and but God didn't give us money. The other thing I thought was, in the kingdom of God, there won't be any money, there won't be any international boundary lines, there won't be any insurance companies and landlords and all that stuff, and that's all man-made stuff, these border lines and interest on money. A lot of people just think that money is a tool, and that if we didn't have it, there would be like chaos. But a lot of famous people, like I said, have believed in eliminating money. And the rationale, even Karl Marx realized that when production reaches a certain stage, with modern machinery and all that, there's no reason to have to divvy and hoard. And it's sort of like the same thing that Muammar Gaddafi said. And I'll show you what this says here. Well, let's take a look at the whole top. I kind of show you how ridiculous this guy St. Paul is, some of the stupid things he says. But this guy Muammar Gaddafi was a really good guy, and it's really pissed me off that that Ronald Reagan bombed his. Gaddafi lived in a tent, and Reagan bombed his compound there and killed his adopted daughter. Let's see, we'll go out a little bit more, just make sure you can see this. But you can compare the saying of Friedrich Engels with Muammar Gaddafi. They're basically the same. It's like when you have an abundance, then there's no reason to have to divvy and hoard things. And you can give it away for free. There's free drinking fountains, but like if you were in the desert or something, water would be a more precious commodity. And, we've got plenty of food to feed the cows and pigs. All that corn that they grow in Iowa and Nebraska goes to feed pigs and cows. Very little of that is used to make cornflakes or tortillas, except like in Mexico. And that can be harvested very easily. I used to have a chart somewhere that tells you, like in the 1900s, it took so many man-hours to produce 100 bushels of corn. Oh boy, I tell you, I almost didn't make it today. I have these panic attacks, and I kind of worked a little bit hard today. I was working at the street fair, and I'm just not used to standing on my feet all day. And I just recently started smoking too. I quit for a while and I started smoking. It's kind of like this nervousness, and I'm definitely going to quit. I think I'm going to throw these stupid cigarettes away because it screws up my heart. Like, before I came to the show, my blood pressure was just like ridiculous. It was like 170 over 90 or 95 even, and I had to take a tranquilizer. I used to come on these shows, and I've been here since like 85 or even before that. And a lot of my friends that have done these shows, Joe Sweeney, Ed Finkelstein, June Excel, I can't remember some of these other people that used to do shows, Pastor Bill Bowler, they've all died, and it seems that people do their shows here and then die. And I often think that, I might be the next, it's like, sometimes I feel like I'm going to die, and I'm going to have my birthday pretty soon. I think I'll be 58. I don't keep track of how old I am. But, so I take these tranquilizers. I took one before I came here. And before that, just 10 years ago, I used to take ecstasy and go out dancing afterwards, or I'd take some acid and go see a concert like at the Rialto or something. But I just don't have that energy anymore. I don't really have the enthusiasm anymore. It's like when I first started out with this abolish money stuff, I thought that, a lot of people would say, hey, wow, that's the right thing to do. It's so simple and obvious. And like I said, so many smart people have believed in eliminating money. And you can see it up on my website. I've got a thing about eliminating money, and I've got this gospel of eliminating money I wrote. And, in the past half a year, I think I've been to the emergency room like maybe 6 times because I get these panic attacks and my blood pressure goes up. And, I've got these tranquilizers now, and but I don't like taking them. I like to kind of control myself and, breathe deep and just, take it easy and not get all worked up and excited about stuff. And so, I did a little too much work today, I think. I used to have so much stamina, and I could dance till 2 and drink a bottle of vodka, and part of the problem was I got a DUI a few years ago, and that kind of ended my party days, which is good. Drinking isn't good for you, and I've really cut back on drinking. I only had 1 beer today, and that was a mistake. I think that made my blood pressure worse. And I didn't eat very much, and I didn't drink enough water, but so I've been at this for a long time. I showed you last time that I did this article in 1985 about the Kennedy assassination. And when I first found out about the Kennedy assassination, it really, it really hurt my heart, because I thought, oh yeah, we've really got a democracy here, but I knew democracy was just one level above tyranny, so I didn't really think democracy was a good thing. Plato said democracy is one level above tyranny, and the ideal situation would be to have a bunch of aristocrats, or not aristocrats, but benevolent dictators would be another way of saying it, and they would, in Plato's Republic, the guardians were not allowed to touch money, but we've reached a point in society where money is superfluous, and it served its purpose. The only real thing it does now is it enables these people on Wall Street to make a bunch of money with their funny money programs, and it enables people to make slaves out of you. there was an article in the paper the other day, they want to raise the minimum wage to $15. And so they did a little study to show how much that would make your hamburger go up if we paid these people $15 an hour. You can see that it would raise the cost of a $3 hamburger to $3.50. I mean, why not do that and essentially give these people a tip? And so that would be, it would push fast food prices up 20%. That would mean an average increase of 60%. Their wages would go up about 60%. And then, I don't know, I saw another article here. It was a graph that showed how many people are in poverty. Well, most of the people making minimum wage are young kids, but, what's so bad about young kids at a summer job or something? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's just slave wages. And if people stop buying this many hamburgers, that would be good too, because, eating meat isn't a good thing. It's not good for your health, and it's not good for the environment. These cows produce methane, and it contributes like 20% of the greenhouse gases, these cows. And plus, all that, those cornfields in Nebraska and all that energy we're using to grow that, and all the water we're using. It's, the Ogallala Aquifer in Nebraska and Oklahoma, it's all going down, and we could have another terrible dust bowl the way things are going. And so, with global warming and all this other crazy stuff, like, the bark beetles killing all the trees. I think that's what this article is about. You can see the kind of dead trees in there. I see this on my hikes when I go hiking around Tucson here. And since it's getting warmer, the insects live longer. So it's in this article here. They were studying whether it's likely that whether it's possible that we could have really quick, sudden changes to the environment. And let's see, I didn't underline anything in here. I can't really. They seemed kind of optimistic that we wouldn't have. It says here the worst case scenario would be the creation of huge zones with too little oxygen for sea creatures to survive, with unknown consequences for the overall ecology of the ocean. Well, they're doing a study at the U of A because there's some kind of bacteria that's killing the shrimp. The shrimp population has declined, and we got all those fish over there in Japan from that Fukushima. They're probably not telling us the truth about that. The radiation coming from that. We'll see 10 years from now how many kids in Seattle have thyroid problems. But, the whole world's just like falling apart. And if a Messiah came, this is my Christmas show, you just kind of have to think, what would the Messiah do? Well, obviously they would, just like the Messiah did. I don't know if Jesus even existed, but whoever wrote those Gospels said that the Messiah rebuked the powers that be, the religious hypocrites. He called the Pharisees a bunch of hypocrites. And I would say, look at Tammy Faye Baker and some of these other people that, they rail against the homosexuals, and yet they got caught doing it themselves. It's like, and then you got these stupid Woodboro Baptist Church that cause all kinds of troubles. These self-righteous people, they think they're doing good and right and stuff like that. But if you really wanted to do good and right, you'd volunteer. And when we abolish money, then everybody would be a volunteer, and you'd get happiness from making things. Today we make things out of very cheap materials because, you can make more money that way. There's a guy here in Tucson called Mr. Goodman, and he puts up these, 8-room mini dorms in our neighborhoods here. I think we finally got a ordinance against that because you can't have that many unrelated people in a building. It's like a commune or something, but it really isn't. It's a 8-room dormitory, and they're sheetrock and 2x4s, and the guy's getting maybe $3,000 a month in rent from these kids. So basically, sheetrock and 2x4s are really cheap. He makes that money back really fast, and maybe the life of the house will be 20 years, but the amount of money he'll make over those 20 years is just astronomical. So, we've also got these big high-rise luxury dorms here too, and it's a biggest moneymaker here, except for Raytheon. If you're from the street fair, they're having that today. I worked at the street fair today for the Iron Horse neighborhood beer booth down there on 7th Street, right across from Che's Lounge on 4th Avenue. So I walked down there. I got there at 10, and I guess, all the stress and having to stand on my feet that long, it just kind of was too much for me. Like I said, I'm 57. The next time you see me, I'll be 58. And so, I'm getting up there, and I'm losing the stamina I used to have. And I do run. I try to run every day and get exercise and try to eat well. But I didn't really eat very much today because I worked too hard. I shouldn't have worked too hard. And so then when I got home, my blood pressure was all up and down and everything. I had to take a tranquilizer, and it was kind of high before I left, but I think I'll be okay. I don't think I'll have a stroke or a heart attack during this show. But this is the Christmas and New Year's show, so it's also my birthday show, but my birthday's not today. I'm not going to tell you when it is. But let's see what else is going on in the world here. Well, we're talking about the economy. Here's a chart showing the number of children in shelters in New York City. And there's 1990 there. That's when it was the lowest, around 5,000. And then 2000, it went up to about 10,000. But now we've got like 22,000, 23,000 homeless children in New York City. It's pretty crazy. And then here's Detroit. It's we just let this just go. People could live there. They could have lived there, and there's a lot of abandoned buildings there and things. People could live there, but and that kind of goes to what this is one of the most terrible things here. And the United States is behind it. These refugees in Syria, there's so many of them. The United States could have stopped this, and we went into Libya and caused trouble. It's just one of the most horrible things. All these people, let's see, numbering just 300,000 1 year ago, Syrian refugees now total more than 2.1 million. And then you got to figure, how many refugees were there from Iraq, and how many refugees were there from Afghanistan, and how many refugees from Libya, and the Palestinians are refugees, and then it goes on and on like that, and it's all because of the United States, and it's a lot of it has to do with these stupid religions, I think of all the religions, I think the dumbest one has to be this Islamic religion. But, the Jewish religion isn't much better. You've got these Hasidic Jews that wear the black robes, and Jesus kind of talked about them, and they were, standing around trying to look pious and holy and all that stuff. And Hitler talked about them too. When Hitler first came into Austria, he said that, what's this? Are these people Germans or what? What are they doing in Germany? And it's kind of like the same situation we have over there today in Europe with these Muslims. Some of them want to wear those full body suits, the burqas, and not show their faces. It's kind of like, the nuns kind of look cute, they look like little penguins, but these people wearing these burqas, and then they bow down to Mecca 5 times a day, which is a total waste of time. God knows your thoughts and prayers. If there is a God, I kind of tend to believe in a God because I've had miracles happen, and I've come close to dying a few times, and so I've seen the light. I've had that out-of-body experience, and it it gave me a feeling of what death is like, and it was a really good feeling, actually. Surging off into the galaxy, and becoming one with the energy, and it was the second best feeling besides love. And it kind of makes me think like that guy Steve Jobs. He said that LSD was one of the major experiences in his life when he took LSD. And I can't remember if he said it was the third best thing, and I can't remember what the others are. I think being in love was, of course, that's always the best thing, to be in love. And being in love gives you a good kind of adrenaline and a good kind of endorphins. And I don't know what this crazy panic attacks does to me. You can get excited, and then, being excited about something good, and then that can lead to a panic attack because, your heart's beating fast. Like today, my heart was beating 100 times. And I wasn't even exerting myself. I was just all hyped up and worried and about it's kind of like an explosion, it's a self-feeding explosion. Like one time when I was in I used to see a psychiatrist over at Kodak. She was a psychiatric nurse, and she also worked at the jail, and she was about my age, yeah, she was about my age, and she was very helpful, and she's had a high blood pressure. She said her blood pressure was like 200 over 100, She'd wake up in the morning and that's what it would be. And so she definitely had high blood pressure, but mine is just related to anxiety, and so I need to stop thinking about myself so much. And that's one thing good about being in love. You stop thinking about yourself, but you can have this good anxiety, and there's bad anxiety. I don't know. It's just like, I sure do hope I can get over this. But my friend used to have panic attacks, and I used to think, come on, get over it. It's ridiculous. What you worrying about? But I do have a lot of things to worry about. I got these. Well, I brought it in. Usually when I do my show, I just look at my desk and what's there. I always tear news articles out and throw them on my desk. And then when I do my show, I clean up my desk a little bit. And here we have the IRS is suing me. This is the second time they've done this. They didn't like my the way I did my income tax. And maybe some of you watching this might learn something. They didn't like it because I took all my deductions on Schedule C for my business. And since I had no income on my Schedule C, my income comes from capital gains and interest. So there really wasn't any, there was nothing there. I don't know. I've talked to some accountants about this and what I should do, and a lot of them told me, well, take your deductions on Schedule A. So I did that, and it makes my tax liability like about, well, the last one I did was in 2010, and it made me pay like $700 more, which isn't that much. It's not that bad. So I've got another one now. I think this one is for 2011, and so now I'm going to have to go up there to Phoenix. They don't have a local office, and I met a really nice lady there. That's her job. I think she's been working over 30 years, she said, and she just needed to look at my receipts. They didn't believe I had all these deductions for property tax, and because that's my business. It's buying and selling vacant lots. And so I've also got this lawsuit, and this is a really bad thing. It's just, I was depending on this for my retirement, and it was an investment. You buy vacant land, and you hope that the development is going to move out there. You hope that somebody else is going to bring the electric and utilities out there. I had a lot out there by the Santa Rita golf course, and somebody they brought, it's easy to bring the electricity there. You just dig a trench and bury the cable out there, and they also, they brought the electricity and the water. That's not too hard to do. The sewer is a little bit harder, but so, they never charged me for that. Somebody else had a bunch of lots out there, so I benefited from that, and so I've got these 50 lots in the subdivision, and suddenly somebody else bought up all the rest of the lots, like about 1,000 other lots, and I thought, oh great, they're going to start developing this, and they suckered us into this HOA. I thought, oh, well, let's just be fair. And so at first I was against the HOA, but then I just thought, well, they're going to charge us a percentage of what it costs. But the people that were doing this weren't very ethical people, and they're being sued now by a guy named Derry Dean Sparlin for like $1 million they took from him investing in this subdivision and some of their other land schemes. These guys were real land sharks, and I don't know why the National Bank of Arizona lent them $35 million. If they'd have looked into their backgrounds, they never would have lent it to him, because one of the guys, he was arrested for securities fraud, I believe, I'm pretty sure. And then the other guy, he went into bankruptcy before, and but they had some other partners that were legitimate, and so they probably brought them in to make it look like a legitimate enterprise, and they somehow got the National Bank of Arizona to lend them $35 million, and then they blew it. They didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't get these lots finished in time to sell, so they just kept losing money, and we lost money too, and they put liens on our lots. And so I did a study at the recorder's office of all these liens. This is just in Sycamore Vista Unit 5, and I've got a blog about this, about this whole Sycamore Vista subdivision. It was one of those bankrupt subdivisions in the 70s, and they never even put the utilities or roads in there. But so I got a bunch of these stupid liens on my lots, but they're expired. The construction work was supposed to have been done more than 6 years ago, and so I started to foreclose against the lien holder, and the lien holder happens to be this guy named Mr. Sullivan, who was the CEO of First Magnus Corporation, which went into $1 billion bankruptcy because they were a significant part of the mortgage fraud, and This guy, Mr. Sullivan, had the liens because he was friends of these developers, like I was saying, they're all kind of crooked, and they were all ex-Navy SEALs, and so they got together. I thought, one of them was a good Christian. He's a really good-looking blonde. He had 4 kids, and he just seemed so sincere. He was an expert swimmer, and he taught people how to swim. And I just thought these guys were going to make money, and they knew what they were doing, but they didn't. And so I ended up, and some of the other lot owners ended up with all these liens on our property, and so I tried to get them removed, due to statutes of limitations. And then suddenly I found out that this guy named Stephen Russo, who's a lawyer here in town, he bought up all the lots from the bank when they went into foreclosure. And now Stephen Russo is suing me. He bought these liens for Mr. Sullivan, and after I sent Mr. Sullivan a letter telling him to give me a quitclaim deed, Mr. Sullivan called up Mr. Russo, who was the head of the HOA, and said, hey, what's going on here? And I don't know why Mr. Russo decided to buy those. Maybe because if he didn't, Mr. Sullivan would have sued the HOA. Well, Mr. Russo probably didn't think I had any money to hire a lawyer, but I just happened to sell some land, and I've got some money together to fight him. But, I think this guy Russo is one of the most meanest, rottenest persons. I had 2 lots in Unit 2 that were ready to sell, and the previous majority lot owners would help us sell our lots to builders. These builders, they won't buy single lots from people. They buy 10 lots at a time or more, So, I asked Mr. Russo, I says, would you help me sell my lots in Unit 2? And he said, yeah, he would, but, just wait, until we sell our lots first. And so, finally, by the time all the lots were sold, he had this lawsuit against me, so he wasn't going to help me. But not only that, but he only wanted to offer me like $25,000, and then he would turn around and sell the lots to the builders for like $33,000, and that's way more than the average commission. An average commission on that would be $3,300, 10%. But Mr. Russo wanted like more than 20% commission on selling these lots, and I would have ended up losing money because I paid off the liens on those, which was like $26,000. And so anyway, this guy Russo and the HOA, they make us go out there and clean up our lots. And I went out there with one of my good, nice young friends named Johnny Poor, and he helped me clean up my lot. And otherwise, if I didn't do that, they would have charged some landscaper to clean it up, and so I went out there, and then like 2 months later, my friend Johnny commits suicide. So every time I go out there, I just can't stop thinking about Johnny and how he died, and he ended up dying like my dad came down to visit me, my mom and dad, and as they were pulling out of my backyard with their RV, they smashed my neighbor's fence. So I asked Johnny to help me fix the fence over there. My mom and dad gave me like $300 to do it. So I paid Johnny really well, and because it wasn't my money. And Johnny ended up, spending it on drugs and liquor. And he had this girlfriend who was like a heroin addict, and so, I didn't know this at the time, that he had a girlfriend who was a heroin addict. I thought she was just a nice young girl going to school, and she could be going to school. I don't really know the whole story behind it. I could find out, though. But so he was heartbroken over this girl, and I told him, you got to get real, man, a girl isn't going to want to be with you unless, you've got a good job. And so, I don't know, we don't know for sure, but he got awfully drunk, and he could have just fallen into the railroad tracks and killed himself, but he said some things in his notebook. Plus, he also told his mother something about suicide. So, anyway, Johnny's gone, and a lot of my other friends are gone, and so it's just kind of, it's like, here, are we alone in the universe? I told you about this last time. They had an article in the New York Times that was all, oh yeah, there's billions of planets out there, and there's the chances that there's life on them. But this guy's kind of refuting that, and I told you before, there's all kinds of contingencies that are necessary. I mean, look, they can't even, they have this chemical soup. If you put this together and you shoot this chemical soup with electricity like lightning, and they can get amino acids in there, but they've never been able to get these amino acids to start forming single-celled animals or anything, And so then down here, the guy, it's staggeringly complex, It's like, and then we have to be the right distance from the sun, and we have to have oxygen, and oxygen is a miracle that we have it on this planet. It's like they had to have water for the oxygen, because these plankton that lived in the water through photosynthesis gave off oxygen. And then another problem was that these volcanoes kept erupting, and the volcanoes would just suck up all the oxygen. It's called the Great Oxygenation Event, and you can see charts about the history of oxygen on Earth, and it hasn't really been here that long, and so we need to, there was a thing in a paper the other day that, there could have been water up on Mars. Yeah, but the Mars atmosphere was like ammonia and stuff and things like that, and so it's just like, we don't have a reverence for this earth like the Native Americans did. I mean, that's the kind of religion we should have. It's like when you take LSD, you realize that, that we're all molecules. This is all molecules, and you move your hand like that, and you wonder, wow, man, you can move your hand. I mean, it's a crazy miracle, and you watch your cat walk across there. I mean, the cat is just a wonderful animal, and so are these other animals, and we don't want these animals to become extinct. There's been major extinctions before, and there could be some in the ocean. That's what the first article I was telling you about. I just read this article. It was like in the New York Times Magazine about this guy who lives down in Texas, and he's an exterminator, and he came across these, they call them crazy ants, and these ants, I don't quite understand, their survival idea, but they kind of like swarm, and they love electricity. So like they'll go into your television set, they'll go into your air conditioner. I mean, like if you've got these crazy ants around your house, you basically have to move, and like, I mean, it was the most, they have fire ants down there too, and that's a really bad thing. Those are really bad, and they're afraid that like these ants could swarm any kind of a ground animal, like that lives in the ground. They could kill them, and they can kill the cows. They'll like crawl into the cow's nose and in their eyes and stuff. And so, they think those ants got here from somewhere like in South America or something. But there's not really much they can do about it. But I got a new book here, and by Mark Lane, and Mark Lane accepted me as a Facebook friend. And Mark Lane has been one of the first guys. He's a lawyer, and he was one of the first people to challenge the Warren Commission report. And he's finally come out here This is his indictment against the CIA for the murder of JFK. And it's about time, you know. He had a really good book before this. It was called Plausible Denial. And it was all about this trial against E. Howard Hunt. And I showed you before that, you know, they picked these guys up out back of the grassy knoll, and they just happened to look a lot like the Watergate burglars, E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. There's a picture of the tramp that they arrested behind the grassy knoll. He was cowering in a gondola car, and the railroad man named Mr. Bowers saw them get into this gondola car after the assassination, and he told the engineer, hey, hold off the train, and he called the police and said, hey, I just saw some guys run into this gondola car. If it wasn't for Mr. Bowers, they would have gotten away. So the sheriffs came over to the gondola, and the so-called tramps were cursing the sheriffs. And so one of the sheriffs, he says in his police report, he jacked a shotgun shell into his shotgun, told these guys to get out of there. And so they sheriffs escorted them through Dealey Plaza right in front of the school book depository, and a lot of newspaper men took pictures of them. And nobody really knew who they were. There weren't any police reports. And so like sometime like right after the Watergate burglary in '72, this guy, I forget who he was, but he was like, he published this magazine called Computers and Animation or something like that. And he was also a JFK buff. So he'd devote a little bit of his magazine to talk about the Kennedy assassination. And he put those pictures in of these tramps. And so one day, I don't know if it was him or somebody else, just happened to look at the Watergate burglar pictures and looked at these tramp pictures and said, oh, wow, you know, that looks just like E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. And you can see the similarity of this guy Sturgis and the tramp there. And so they had a couple, first of all, they had the Rockefeller Commission, the Commission on CIA activities within the United States in 1975. Dick Gregory, the comedian Dick Gregory, and also, well, that was afterwards, I think. I don't remember when Jim Garrison did it, but Jim Garrison got on the, Jim Garrison was he was the county attorney in New Orleans, and he was the star of Oliver Stone's film JFK, and so Jim Garrison took these pictures on to Johnny Carson of the Tramps, and he held them up just like they did, you know, in these America's Most Wanted type shows, and asked people, hey, do you know who these guys are, you know, and Jim Carson kept trying to, hey, put those down, don't show anybody, and then they cut to a commercial, which was very suspicious. But then, like I was saying, like during the Watergate burglary, this somebody, I don't remember who it was, but they just happened to have this Computers and Animation magazine with these tramps, and they happened to see these pictures of the Watergate burglars, and they thought that it looked a lot like E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. And they're both CIA agents, and they're both also anti-Castro Cuban, or they're not Cuban, but they worked with the Cubans to try to overthrow Castro in the Bay of Pigs and all that. And they blamed Kennedy for failing in the Bay of Pigs, so that's another reason they wanted to get rid of him. Plus, they say he was against big business. And his son, Bobby, as Attorney General, he really clamped down on these mergers and acquisitions, which form these conglomerates and these multinational companies, you know, like one of my Facebook friends recently put up a picture that shows, the company named Kraft, that makes Kraft cheese and Kraft salad dressing. Well, they own a whole bunch of other things too. There's like 8 or 9 companies that make just about all the food in the world. Well, and gee, I wonder if my show went off or something or what. I thought my show was... Oh, I guess it did.